Hello everyone and welcome to the stream. Hope everybody is doing well tonight. RCW, good to see you. How are you? So tonight we're going to pick up in our refactor effort and push a little bit further towards the end here. We are getting near the end, at least to the point where we're going to be able to start debugging through and find all the little things that we missed and bug fix and all that good stuff. So that is what is on the agenda for tonight. Spiro, good to see you. How's it going? Hope you're doing well. I know you were streaming for quite a bit today. Okay, so before we jump into the meat and potatoes of the stream, I do want to take a quick second and just thank the supporters of the channel, starting with the partners who are the highest tier of subscription over on Patreon and YouTube memberships. They are Dustin Punt, Gabby Bashir, and Gerboles Inc. I would also like to thank all the other supporters listed here. They are a combination of the other tiers of support over on Patreon, YouTube memberships, as well as Twitch subscriptions. Thank you all very much for your support. It is greatly appreciated and helps me grow the channel and whatnot. So thank you very much for that. That being said, I would also like to thank all the viewers, whether you are tuning in from the YouTube side or the Twitch side. I'm pointing to different monitors here because we are simulcasting to both of those platforms. So thank you guys. Of course, without you guys, none of this would exist. So I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for being here. All right, so you got all your rants out, Spiro. Awesome. Yeah, I know you were on fire today for sure. One Salty Echo, first time chat. Welcome. Heard about you today from Spiro. Well, thank you for coming along here and checking this channel out, and thank you, Spiro, for the introduction there. Looking forward to your stream and seeing what you're about. All right, perfect. Yeah, so we're gonna get into our sort of refactor effort that we've got going on here. I will take a couple of minutes here just to quickly recap, sort of what we're doing here on the channel and what this whole thing is about. So what we are doing here on the channel is we are making a game engine completely from scratch using C as the programming language and Vulkan as our initial rendering backend. I say initial rendering backend because we do have plans to support Direct 3D and Metal at a minimum, as well as potentially OpenGL. I haven't really decided on that one yet. And so, we have lots of plans as far as that goes. The engine is currently cross-platform, at least desktop-wise, so it is available on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. And the entire project is open source. So if we go here, there is a GitHub repo. In fact, I'm going to drop a link to the website here so that you've got that as well. So kohiengine.com has got links to everything here. It's got a link to the stream. It's got a link to the GitHub, our Discord server where there's about 900 people. And of course the repo itself. So this is completely open source. It is free. It is Apache 2.0 licensed, which essentially says you're free to use it for personal or commercial use. Does not matter. The only thing that I ask is that you say you used Kohi if you use it. It will never have any sort of licensing fees of any kind. It will never have any royalties of any kind. It will always be 100% free and open source software. So, with that, all the information about the project is here. Just a quick little blurb about that too. We started off as a YouTube tutorial series, and we'll come back to that in just a second. We changed formats a few times over on YouTube and ultimately landed on a live stream format because the tutorial format doesn't really work after a certain point. Because game engines are pretty large, complex pieces of software, and that really outgrows that format at some point. So that's where we've landed now. That's how we've gotten to where we are now. And we are in the middle of a pretty large refactor effort, taking care of some technical debt that has stacked up since we started the series, really. One of the things about this series is it is designed to be an educational resource on a way to build a game engine. It's not the only way. It's not necessarily always going to be the right way. But I say that because it's broken down into various digestible pieces, and with that comes some design decisions that have to be, sometimes taken care of after the fact. So we've built up some technical debt based on some of those early design decisions to make things fit the tutorial format, and we are in the middle of a refactor to handle that stuff now. So that is more or less where we are at, project-wise. It's been going on for about 3 years at this point. So yeah, lots of commits. I think we have 305 commits on the main branch, and we are currently working in this feature reorg, which is a reorganization of the entire project. And this has got 23 additional commits ready to be merged, right? So because we are in the middle of a refactor, I can't run it at the moment, but here are a couple of screenshots of things that we're working on. So we've got the start of a basic PBR pipeline. We have some basic UI in place, some debuggability. We have a sound engine in place with 3D spatial sound. So we've got that support as well. We've got some basic things like shadow maps and stuff like that, and the ability to load and unload scenes, things of that nature. And so all of the technical details about the project itself is available here on the GitHub repo. Okay, so enough about that. So what we are in the middle of, and where we kind of left off, is really this comment right here, which is where we were going to pick the render graph out from the application config. That's this file over here, and go ahead and stand that up based off of the configuration that we have in here. So this file that we're looking at right here is the configuration for the application that makes use of the engine. When I say application, the application is essentially what drives the engine. So a quick overview of the structure of the project. We have things broken out into a series of different libraries, and then we have an application. So everything here that is kohi dot is part of the engine, or it is a plugin to the engine. So our kohi core is where a lot of our basic types exist. Things like our containers, like our dynamic array, freelist, that kind of thing. Debug, utilities, identifiers like UUIDs, things of that nature. Our math library, our memory allocators, things of that nature. Our platform code, so all of our platform-specific code lives here. Our string library, things of that nature, right? Things that are super core to any project that could potentially use this. So the core project is designed to be used not only by the engine itself, but also by the utilities that sort of go with a game engine, right? A game engine is sort of a tool chain, right? It's not really just a single chain. It's really a set of tools. And some of those things may be external command line tools. Some of those things may be, external processes that need to run outside the actual application or the editor, things like that. And so that is what Kohi Core provides, right? Provides some of that basic stuff that we need for those things. The next thing we have is the runtime. You can think of this as the actual engine itself. This is what contains the game loop. This is what contains some of our basic application structures, our audio front end, our renderer front end, our plugin architecture. It includes some of our input logic and system variables and things of that nature, right? It also includes all of our systems, right? So all these systems you see located here, all of these systems exist in the runtime. And so the application uses the runtime. The runtime references the core, right? And that's sort of the way that that's split up. I mentioned plugins. We do have a plugin architecture. So we have our plugins are essentially our backends to two of our systems. So we have our audio plugin, which has an OpenAL backend, right? So if we wanted to use direct sound or something like that, we could create another one of these and use that instead. And then we have our renderer plugin, which for now is just a Vulkan plugin, right? So there'll be another one of these for Direct 3D, and there'll be another one for Metal when we get to that point. And then we also have the standard UI, right? So this is a UI plugin, and we're going to call this the standard. So the standard UI is a retained mode UI that comes as a plugin because there's going to be more than one UI system, right? And so the idea of splitting everything out into plugins is so that the application can configure and choose what plugins it actually wants to use and which ones it doesn't want to use. And it only includes what it actually needs. That keeps things flexible, and it keeps things very compartmentalized, right? And sort of neatly separated, right? And so we're eventually going to have an immediate mode UI plugin, and that would sit alongside of this. And it's possible that maybe we have a game that doesn't use either, right? We are going to have a editor, which is going to be a separate application that's probably going to use the standard UI, right? But it might not use, our immediate mode UI, or maybe the opposite of that, right? So that's the reason for that. We have a basic test library, some tools, not really important. The last bit here is our test bed. So this right here is our application, right? And we can see that that is denoted by this K app. And so the application itself is actually very lightweight. It contains a single source file that's literally the entry point into the application, and that's it. And this is actually going to become even lighter, right? So the executable is super, super light, super small. And then we have what we consider the application or the game code, which exists as a separate hot reloadable library. So the idea here is that we can build this while the engine is actually running, and it will actually refresh that logic and reload it where it makes sense to do that, right? And so that's why we have those things split up the way that we do, and that is more or less the structure of the entire project. That all said, let me catch up with chat. I hope all that makes sense. Art and the Coder, first time chat, welcome. How are you doing? You almost typed your password into chat. Do you want me to... Yeah, I'll delete that number for you if you want. That way it's... That would have been bad. Yeah, no problem. Welcome to the stream. I hope all of that intro stuff made sense. Okay. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Metahound, over on the YouTube side, says, can you do a quick explanation on versioning the app on CMake? So I can't do that because I don't use CMake. we have our own build system that we've sort of put together. So we don't use CMake. We use Makefiles for right now. And one of the things that we're actually going to be tackling a little bit later into the project is we are actually going to build our own custom build system in C as well, so that we don't even have to rely on Make, right? But for right now, we're using Makefiles, and those Makefiles are configured via a series of flags that are passed by these build scripts, right? So when I go to build, let's see, debug's not the one I want. I want this guy. So when we go to actually perform a build, it launches either this bash script or a bat file if you're on Windows, right? And it builds using make and then a make file, and then passing in through some various options, right? And so our version gen is basically an external tool that we've written that automatically creates version numbers for us, specifically build and revision numbers based off of the date and time. And then, so we have the version generator for that, and then that's used by all the libraries to actually version them, right? but yeah, they all essentially are just these make files, right? So there's two make files. There's one for libraries and there's one for executables, which is referenced down here, right? Eventually, those are going to be combined into one. And like I said, eventually this whole system is going to be replaced by a C build system so that we don't have to have all these different scripts over here. But for right now, that's kind of where we're at. Can we get a make file tour? So the make file, I will quickly open it and kind of talk through it, but I don't want to spend too much time on it, right? Here it is. Let me actually... I don't want to spend too much time on this because it is 200 lines long, right? But more or less, we have all of our compiler flags up here. So we build using a lot of different flags, right? So we're pretty strict with the way that we generate our code. We treat almost all warnings as errors, with the exception of deprecations. We want those to be warnings, and you guys will see that when I build. But more or less, the way this works is we have a single setup in here for Windows because it needs some specific wildcard functionality because it doesn't actually contain that. Whereas Linux and Mac OS do actually contain something that allows us to do that. But more or less what this is doing is this is gathering up all of the compiler flags, the include flags, all that kind of stuff, depending on what platform we're on, right? So that's what all of that does. This is what generates our version, and this is for the library that we're currently building. So what this does is it generates a file in one of these libraries. I'll open core, for example. It'll generate a library name underscore version.h. We open this guy up, and oh, interesting. We have an error message in there, so that might actually be. I might have actually broken that recently. Let's see. I wonder if that's broken across the board, and I just didn't realize it. It might be. No, it works for this one. Okay. So we ordinarily get something that looks like this. I'm not sure why there's a space in here, but we have major version, minor version, and then we have build and then revision. So the revision here, this is based off of the day of the year, and then this part is based off of the time of day. And that's just so that we always have a unique number. This is going to be more important when we actually have an automated build process. The only thing that's automatic about these version numbers is right here. Everything else about it comes from, let's see, this version.txt, which we can set for each one of these individual libraries, right? So each one of these libraries has a version.txt where we set the base version here, and that's used to generate this, right? And so eventually, again, when we start building and tagging, we'll actually have a build system in place that exists on the repo that will actually build and version this stuff for us automatically, depending on how we tag it. But for now, it's still slightly manual. So we have that, and then let's see. So we have different debug and release configurations, and that just modifies the compiler flags, right? Nothing too crazy to see there. We do some basic folder scaffolding. So like if the build directory doesn't exist, if the object directory doesn't exist, we set that up. Here is where the version file is generated. So I'll have to look through that and see why that's failing. And then here is... let's see, that's the linking and compiling is all here. So it looks pretty much like what you might expect. The only difference is we use a lot of variables here instead of, hard-coded list of things that you might see in some other build files. So a lot of this stuff is actually automated and passes values around, and that's actually what makes it super dynamic. And we could use the same make file for all of our different projects, and all we have to do is just change what we pass to it. And that's more or less it, right? At least as much detail as I want to go into now. We've touched this build system a few times throughout the series. And so if you were to go through the series, that's more or less where the in-depth explanation of that goes. When we get ready to redo the build system, which is probably going to be sometime soon, because I think I want to tackle that before we actually release 1.0 of this, we'll again be going more in depth on this. So hope that helps. How do you imagine your C build system functioning? So it's probably going to be somewhat similar. At least I'm going to take inspiration from what was it called? No build, which Soding actually came up with, right? So it's a C-based build implementation that he actually put together. So I'm gonna take a look at this, and there's some things in here that I actually kind of like about it that I might actually redo. But yeah, if you're interested in that, I don't want that specific C file. This is the repo. So I'll drop that link into both chats if you guys are interested in that. All right. So I think that's, let's see. Hi, how long have you been doing C and graphics programming, and how did you learn those two? So the short answer is I've been programming off and on since I was like 7 years old. But I only really started C programming probably about 4 years ago or so. I did C++ a lot before that. I learned C++ first, and then I sort of found myself doing sort of a C++ light is what I call it, which is like very C-style C++. And then I decided to take the plunge and just switch over to C. But yeah, I mean, I used C++ for well over a decade before switching to C, so it's been quite a while. As far as graphics programming, I really got my start in graphics programming, I would say 2008, maybe 2007. So I've been doing it a little while. Most of my experience has been OpenGL. I only switched to Vulkan probably about 4 years ago. I'm a fan of automating build systems. Yeah, exactly. I do want to do that as well, for sure. Have you considered scons in Python? Nope. So one thing that I want to do is, and one thing that I'm trying to do with this whole project is to have as few dependencies as possible. And I think I listed here what you actually have to do. So prerequisites, our list is pretty slim, right? So like we have to have Make for Windows and Visual Studio Community as a backend for Clang, right? And Git for Windows, right? I'm trying to keep this list as small as possible. So I want the whole thing to basically just rely on a C compiler and maybe like the Vulkan SDK and stuff like that, right? I want to keep that list as small as possible. For Linux, it's pretty small as well, right? So Git, Make. I should put Clang/GCC in here. Oh, I did right here. So cross-platform prerequisites, right? So these are the specific ones for Windows, Linux, and Mac. And then we have the cross-platform ones. There's also the audio plugin prerequisites, right? But I'm trying to keep this as small as possible, this list. All right. So, Tammin, good to see you. How's it going? Welcome. What are the plans for the new build system? Yeah, I think I kind of touched that, right? I haven't planned it out a whole heck of a lot, but it's probably going to be somewhat similar to no build, right? I have some differences that I'm going to make from that, but I think it's pretty similar to what I'm going to make, right? Kuju raiding with a party of 18. I just saw that. Thank you very much for the raid. I hope you're doing well tonight. What do you get up to on stream? I saw that you were streaming earlier. For those of you who don't know, Kuju is making a pretty kick-ass looking game. Do I have... There's a shout-out. Do I have a link to that? I don't know if I do. I could have swore that I did, though. It was on Steam. Let me just grab that really quick, because I think you guys should definitely see it. I gotta look up the actual page. Give me one. Bear with me 1 second. There it is. Highly recommend you guys check out that game. It is pretty freaking sweet looking. All right. Sorry, it took me a minute to pull that up. Working on upgrading hat buildings with cool physics. Thanks for the shout out. Yeah, no problem. Stream's going decent so far. We're just kind of getting started, right? Yeah, so no worries there. But yeah, sorry it took me a minute to kind of get to it. I got behind on chat, right? We were just sort of reviewing where the project is at and kind of the build system and stuff like that. So I hope that all that stuff made sense for you new guys here. Let's see. Timp says, I'm getting so tired of build systems, I'm thinking about making my own build program that generates batch files. Yeah, so that's part of exactly what I'm talking about, right? Is like, anybody that's used CMake at length knows that it's kind of terrible, right? And overcomplicated and error prone and all this other stuff. And it's like, I want to just build a build system, ironically, that just uses C, right? And that in and of itself just makes it portable and, you know, relatively easy to use. And then it's just got a super simple configuration file format that I can use that is very easy to understand and configure. That's the goal. Let's see. What is that 3D scene that looks like a castle, by the way? Is it some kind of standard testing model? I've seen it a lot. I think you're talking about the Sponza. You're talking about this guy. Yeah, that's the Sponza mesh. Yep. Yeah, Taman mentioned it there in chat. Yeah. So that's a fairly common testing mesh that's used. The reason that I use this is because it's got a lot of different surfaces on it. It shows off the lighting really well, and it also contains a lot of sort of submeshes. I think it contains almost 400 submeshes. So it's a really good sort of load test on the engine to actually see it running, right? All right. Recently learned about Premake. I like it a lot more than CMake so far. Yeah, I did look at Premake. But again, like, I'm trying to keep the list of stuff as small as possible. Like, the list of dependencies as small as possible. Like, nothing's more annoying than when I go to look at a project and I see it has CMake. Like, these days, it almost makes me click off. Right? Because I'm like, I don't want to have to download another program just to pull your dependencies so I can build your program. Like, that's just asinine to me. And so... that's kind of what I'm trying to avoid in general. Good to see the Refactor Tractor. Yeah, we're still on it. We're still putting some hours in on the Refactor Tractor for sure. All right, so back through all of this stuff. we were here, and we were talking about picking out our render graph from our application config. Although it looks like we're going to have ads here in a second, so what I'm going to do is whenever ads come up, I'd like to pause the stream. So Twitch gives us ads every 30 minutes for up to 90 seconds. So I'd like to just pause the stream so that nobody misses anything. We put a timer on there so you guys know when we're coming back. And that's sort of the way I like to run the stream. That way nobody misses anything, right? Because full screen ad covering the code, you know, overriding my voice, that sucks for a programming stream. So those are going to kick off here in a second. And I won't take as much time to explain that going forward, but the first ad break, I like to sort of explain that ahead of time. Preach. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So we'll pick up here in just a second. I'm just waiting on those ads to kick off, which is right now. Light Drop, thank you for the Prime sub. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Appreciate the support. All right, so we got about a minute left on ads. By the way, I usually suggest also that you guys hydrate during ad breaks, right? So if you have to go grab water or something, now is the time to do it. Almost done. All right, ads are dead. I don't know why it said starting soon at the end of that instead of done. I guess my script is still broken. Whatever. Fix it later. I definitely watched Travis hold the C programming language by an altar and hold a sermon about the dangers of dependencies. You know, I mean, I probably would, right? I'm not a fan of dependencies. I hate relying on external libraries for stuff. Especially when you're like pulling from a package repository somewhere, right? And you have library updates that break stuff. That's just super annoying to me. I don't like it. I try to avoid it like the plague. And that's one of the reasons that I try to program things the way that I do. Zero Max, thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Welcome. Okay. So, I think I finally caught up on chat. Sweet. All right. So, we were talking about our app config. And specifically, we have a section here for render graphs, right? And specifically, we want to look at this forward graph. Now, technically, we can have multiple render graphs, right? For now, we're just going to be interested in the one, and we're going to search for that by name. Now, I've already done some of this work offline, so this left off can technically go away because that's technically done at this point. What we had to change was in application config. This is sort of the parser that deals with this. Is we essentially just had to pick out a new node out of this KSIN file, right? So this is, for those of you who are new here as well, this is our proprietary storage format that we set up. It looks a lot like JSON. We called it jokingly KSIN, right, for kohi, object storage notation or something like that. I forget what we actually said it stood for. So we kind of have our own custom storage format that's extensible and somewhat expressive, right? And so we initially use that to create scene files so that we could have nested objects and things of that nature. But we quickly were able to expand it into other uses. One of those uses being our configuration for our application, right? So now I can say, okay, well, give me an array out of this called render graphs. With that, we want to get how many elements render graphs contains, which in this case it'll be 1. Then we loop through those elements. We grab each config out of there at that index, right? And all we're going to pull from that is the name from that, right? So we're just going to pull this, and then we're going to take the entire rest of the thing and treat it as a string, and we're going to save that into a sort of new render graph configuration, which is here, right? And so this literally just contains a name and a configuration string. And then we push that to an array of render graphs in the configuration. So when we go into the file, or when we go into the application itself, now we can say, let's grab the application config, and then let's count how many render graphs there are, make sure that we actually have one, and then loop through those and just find the one that's called forward graph, right? So we have a hard requirement here on the name. Has to match, right? So forward graph, those things have to match. If we don't find one, we bleat about it, right? If we do find one, then we go ahead and we create the render graph passing through the configuration string that was saved from the configuration. The render graph then parses off all of this configuration, sets up all of our render graph nodes, the types, the sources, the sinks. It sets up all of that stuff and creates it for us all from this configuration so that we don't have to do that stuff in code, right? And it allows us to quickly adjust our render graph simply by editing this file. So this is brand new. This is unexercised at this point, but that's the goal. And so we go ahead and we create the render graph here, make sure it's successful. If it's not, we bleat about it in boot. Otherwise, we say, okay, our render graph is found, we're good to go. And that's basically as far as I got sort of offline, right? And so we take that render graph and we store it in a forward graph, which is nothing more than a render graph on our game state, right? So we just store that in our game state, and that is all there really is to it. Now, when we create a render graph, there are two things that we have to pass to it. We have to provide to every render graph a global color buffer, which is nothing but a pointer to a texture, and a global depth buffer, which is nothing but a pointer to a texture, right? At a minimum, we have to provide those things. If the render graph itself needs any other targets than that, it is responsible for providing those, or the individual nodes in here are responsible for providing those. An example for that would be the shadow map has to provide its own maps, right? But at a minimum, we have to provide those things. And here is where the to-do is, right? So we don't currently have a reference to grab here. Now, these two things exist on the currently bound window that we're actually going to draw to. We do technically have multi-window support in the application, right? We can define more than one window here. However, this application is not going to support that. It's not going to use it. So we can just say, we could just grab safely the first window out of this list and use it. And so when we actually set up the platform and all of that stuff, windowing is part of the platform layer. We set that up and we get our window. So what we basically need to do is we need to say, okay, platform, what is the current window that we want to deal with, right? And when we go to create the render graph, we are going to get the color buffer and depth buffer that are assigned to that window. The reason those are assigned to the window is because the window is what contains the surface that we ultimately have to draw to. And so it just makes sense that the texture that's underlying also goes with that. The depth buffer also kind of makes sense to bind it there, right? So we keep those two things with the renderer specific layer of the window data. So those are the first things that we actually have to get in order to make this connection complete. Let's see. Bad Cop, thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Welcome. Yuki Dookie, thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Welcome. Bad Cop, I feel like I've seen you around quite a lot, and I think I'm following you on Twitter as well. Okay. Funnily, audio seems the hardest to implement. I mean, it depends, right? So our audio system is actually using OpenAL, which actually abstracts a lot of other audio systems. That's the reason I chose it. That was a little bit tricky, but it's a bit like working with OpenGL where you've got buffers and stuff like that you have to write to. So it's not that crazy. We actually do have 3D spatial audio working with it as well. And it didn't. I think I wrote it in a weekend, so it didn't take all that long. We do have to make all of our own effects for it, though. So, like, if we want reverb, for example, we have to implement that ourselves, which should be interesting. I found that writing my own tools projects is faster than fighting dependency issues all day, unless it's a good project. 100%. Yeah, that's been my experience as well. Yeah, so I fully agree with that. You had a shower thought that you can't get out of your head, so you might as well share it. Go ahead. Let's see. Oh no, not Twitter. Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm following you on Twitter. Some of that stuff is hilarious, but it's awesome. Yes, Spiro brings up a good point. We're not doing bash around here. What are you doing? Yeah, I saw. What was that language that you were talking about the other day that had bash as a compile target? That just hurt my brain. Like, I looked at that and went, but why though? Amber, that was it. Yeah. But why? Why would you? Why? Just why? Not audio implementation, custom packed assets. Oh, okay. That's a different deal for sure. Bash sounds painful. I mean, it can be. Just ask Bad Cop. Bash as a compile target is more painful to me than a JavaScript OS. I don't know about that. I feel like a JavaScript OS is just chaotic evil. Whereas Bash maybe is a step back from that. Maybe. Yes. That's it, Bad Cop. Bash as a compiler target is chaotic dumb. Oh, man. If you don't post that on Twitter, I'm going to. That's beautiful. In fact, I'm going to quote you on it. Even better. Here we go. That's excellent. Oh, chaotic dumb. I have some uses for that. I'm gonna hold that one and keep that in my back pocket for sure. All right. So herein lies the rub, because I think on our renderer front end, don't we have that? Or is that only the renderer backend that has that? What is it? Current window? Oh, it's only, Okay, so only our renderer backend context actually has that. We don't have a way from the renderer front end or even the platform to actually determine what is the current window, right? Or what we want to use. Okay. So when we do when we create a new window, we do keep a pointer to that. So maybe I could just use that, right, and not worry about the window binding for now. I mean, that'll be an issue in multi-window applications, but this isn't a multi-window application, so I'm not going to worry about that for right now, I guess. Platform. Okay, that's actually a good question. Did I actually create this yet? Platform. Window create. So here are our individual implementations for Windows, Linux, and I haven't done Mac OS yet. And then the engine creates this in the boot sequence. So we have new window, new window. Then we push it into engine state windows. Okay. So I guess literally I can just use the first one. Wait a minute, where was that? That's in the engine state. Is that accessible? I don't think it is. Why did I store that in the engine state instead of the application state? What was I thinking there? What was I thinking? So here's where we extract that out of the application config. Oh. That's actually done. Oh yeah, this is going to be a problem too. So I guess what we could do is we could just have something that gets us a window by name from the engine. That seems kind of crappy. We have app config windows, right? But it seems like the application should have access to that somehow. Maybe I should move the array of those to the application instead of the engine. Let's see where else this is used. Yeah, I even have a fix me in here about this. Find a better way to select the active window. So that is why this needs that. but technically the application itself should be responsible for selecting the active window. Oh, right. There are some other issues with this too. Because our event loop also relies on the window. So like this whole platform pump messages thing is going to be an issue if we have more than one. I'm going to put a fix me in here about that as well. The event loop in the platform layer depends on active window. So there is some stuff we're going to have to fix whenever we want multiple windows. Not a huge deal, but something we need to consider. It's probably going to wind up being like a separate loop per window, right? Because we actually have this is suspended state, which is technically actually tied to the window being minimized, right? So whenever we minimize the window, we say is suspended is true, which means that we basically skip all of this stuff in here. And that's in the engine state and should not be. So theoretically, in theory, this means there should be one of these loops per window. And platform pump messages is actually going to have to take a pointer to the window. Okay. I'm not going to think about that right now, because that's a rabbit hole I really don't want to go down right now. But it is something that we do need to fix. So I think probably what I'm going to do is just make a simple accessor to say get active window. And then like when we get ready to refactor it later, we'll change where that's stored and how that active window is selected. But I think for right now, I'm just going to make like a getter at the engine level, as much as I hate that. So let's go to the H file and we'll do, I guess I'll put it towards the bottom, right? So do KAPI, KWindow, and we'll say engine active window get. That's probably going to want a struct here. Do we have? We don't have a forward declaration for that somehow. Okay. 0xF06. First time chat. Hello, how's it going? Welcome. Looks like I've got some chat to catch up on, actually. Sinochrome Mac. Yep, we do support Mac. We do actually natively support Mac OS. How do you handle platform-specific window options? You just ignore features that aren't supported everywhere. Yeah, that's more or less what we're going to wind up doing. At least in the short term, right? So we pretty much just handle like resizes, maximize, minimize, open, close, right? So that's pretty unanimous stuff. But like outside of that, we don't really support it. Handling platform unique features is so fun. Yeah, so fun. Exactly. You just throw a create window function pointer to my program and ignore any configs. But I was never in the situation where I had to support it. Fair enough. Just support one window and call it done. So I would do that. But the reason I'm supporting more than one window is because I want the option when we create our editor application to have like pop-up windows, right? With like dialogues and stuff. So that everything is not bound to just like one screen, right? So if you had a multi-monitor setup, you could have one window per monitor kind of thing, right? So that's that's going to be the situation where I'm going to want to support that. And it's not going to take too much work to get from where we are to that point. It's just I have to convert some of the platform code to be Windows specific instead of global, which isn't a huge deal, but it's there. Dang it, I didn't want that there. Okay. So we have that. And we'll go back to here. And let's see, let's go above all the static functions. And we'll put it here. Right, and what we'll actually do is we'll say return the address of engine state Windows, whoops, sub-0. With a big fat fix me, multi-window support, right? Whoops, that needs to be an arrow operator. Okay, so we have that. That means that we can go to our test bed, and now we can say k window. I guess I'll call this current window equals engine active window gap, right? And then from here, I can actually extract this data. Sleepy Mushroom, good to see you. How are you doing? Didn't see the stream last time. Yeah, that's no worries. Yeah, we came back last night, actually. Even a single window can have different types of frames, be adjustable, static, even support transparency. Yeah, exactly. So like all that kind of advanced window stuff, I'm not supporting, at least not yet. And probably what I might do is I might support some of those features only on those platforms, right? Some of the neat features that might be actually useful. I'll support it on that platform, but like the biggest pain in the butt right now is actually Linux in terms of windowing. Even moving a window around can be complicated depending on how you want the mouse to work in the game. Yes, that's true too. So right now, our mouse in the game actually works relative to the window itself. So we don't get window events like outside the window currently, which we may eventually need. So that may be interesting to implement as well. Sounds like using present tense for supporting macros is a lie. Pop-ups can be on the main screen. IMGUI can handle multiple screens. They call the feature docking. Yeah, so I mean, for like a multi-viewport type of setup, like what you might find in Unity, for example, that works, right? But like physical windows is a whole different beast. Plus, we're not using IMGUI. Let's see. What's MacDev like? Don't you need to pay some license fee to sign it or something? I think eventually we'll have to do that. Right now, I haven't bothered with it, to be completely honest. It's just unsigned. We're definitely not that far along. If you need multiple main windows, then yeah. SOL without proper support. Exactly. Yep. Yeah, AutoMod did catch your message, but I did approve it. I think I was quick enough. Let's see. Just open multiple applications and check for the other processes already running. I thought about doing that, but it's like, if I'm going to do all of that, why not just support it the right way and have it all be single process, right? I could do it that way and, connect together via sockets or something crazy like that if I really wanted to, but yeah, I would much rather just use multiple windows, because then I can utilize like the same messaging system to just pass messages back and forth and stuff like that. Don't think it's possible to in Win32 to resize without artifacts. I believe UWP it can work. Yeah, so I mean, what I do is, so on my resize event, and we're gonna get ads here in a second, so I might get it interrupted. But as you're resizing, and I actually do this across the board, is I wait a certain number of frames after the resizing stops to actually recreate the swap chain and start rendering again, just to avoid any issues around that. IPC is definitely worse than multi-window, yeah, for sure. I don't want to mess with that. Especially since that's also super platform specific. iOS dev sucks. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting bridge to cross when we come to it. But I'm not even going to tackle that until we actually have Metal built in. Ads. Seeing you over on the YouTube side, hello. Welcome. So we got about a minute left on ads, and then I will resume the stream, just so that nobody misses anything. It's got about 30 seconds left on ads. Almost done. All right, cool. So the best UX for resizing is rebuilding the swap chain every frame. Yeah, I used to do that, and it caused more problems than it was worth, for sure. Especially if you were trying to like render that stuff, just because of the way that the swap chain would sort of become out of date, and then you'd have like frames in flight while you were trying to sort of also recreate the swap chain, and there was a lot of synchronization required around that, and I didn't find that it actually made the user experience that much better. Right? It's doable, but it was kind of a pain in the butt. So I just didn't bother. I'm just like, okay, well, when you resize the window, I just wait 30 frames to draw the next thing, to actually perform the swap chain resize. It's slowish, but Microsoft Solitaire on Universal Windows platform resizes fine-ish while rebuilding the swap chain. Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's doable, but I'm also going to have to support that with multiple backends as well. So to me, it's just like, it's a lot simpler to just say, you know what, let me know when you're done resizing, and then I'll rebuild the thing, right? And I could change my mind on that and very easily swap that around, but for now, it's just the easiest way to get around it. Mickey Maven, hello. How's it going? I'm making a, let's see, I'm making a 2D OpenGL game that had artifacts with the resizing. Checked how some other games handle the window resize. Some of them crashed. Yeah, exactly. That's the worst, right? You absolutely do not want to do that. And I'm assuming by artifacts you mean scaling artifacts, or like part of the screen shows up white or black because the frame buffer size is too small, like when you're expanding the window, that kind of thing. To me, I'm not really worried about it, right? Like resizing it's an edge case, right? That's not really all that important of an edge case. Like, you're not going to be resizing the window while you're doing anything meaningful. So I just don't deal with it for now, essentially. Yeah, when growing, it has a black border for one frame. Yep, exactly. Yeah. If you set the brush color to be black. Otherwise, it'll be white. All right, so we were in the middle of trying to get these things. So this is going to be current window. And then, we have renderer state. And then color buffer. That should be the address of. Right. So we'll take this. And we'll do depth buffer. This is no longer a to-do. Right? Move this here. We'll say from the currently active window. Right? Okay, so we have those. We just pass them through here. That is our render graph creation done. So the next thing that we're going to have to do is in our, whoops, I did want the H file. Right, so we have our creation. We probably ought to handle our destruction next. We still have to come back and handle that. So let's see. Actually, destruction is going to be handled after the update because it's further down in code. So let's do the application update is where we want to tie into that, right? So all the way at the end, right before we update the update clock, we want to go ahead and perform do we want to say execute frame here? I feel like that should probably be done. I feel like that should probably be done after the update. So we have prepare frame. Do we do it in prepare or render? Let's do it in render, actually. Let's not put it here. Let's put it in render. I think it's actually going to wind up having to be split. We might actually have to split it, but we'll do render graph, execute frame. The graph is going to be the address of state forward graph. We're going to pass the p frame data through, right? And I think this does return a Boolean. Yes, it does. So let's check that to make sure it was a success. And if it's not, we're going to bleat about it. Render graph failed to execute frame. See logs for details. Return, if I can spell it, false. All right. execute the render graph. Now, the only thing that we might have to do some checks to see if the render graph is actually able to be executed at that point. So that may prematurely fail if we start, sort of doing our game loop before the actual render graph is set up, which is theoretically possible. So that might be an issue. We do need to do render graph load resources, which I'm thinking should probably happen. That probably ought to happen in application initialize, right? This is right where we flip the sort of running flag to true, right? So we'll do render graph load resources. We're just going to pass the address of state forward graph, and we'll check that to make sure it was successful. And if not, failed to load resources for render graph. See logs for details. And that is because all of our render graph nodes that are going to be executing from all of this are going to report their own individual errors, right? So this error will technically come at the very end. Return false. Right? So we have the load resources. I guess we could do... I'm trying to remember where the finalize should happen. Finalize should probably happen before this. I suppose we could do the finalize. I suppose here. Right, so we can pass the address of states forward graph. Failed to finalize render graph. See logs for details. We might want to, I'm going to put to do here. We might want to internalize that step. Because what this does is it essentially it loops through the render graph and gets all of the sources and sinks and performs the linkages between all of the nodes, right? So if we take a look at our application config, right, how we have all of these source names set up, right? We have the frame begin, and then our clear color source is frame begin color buffer, so it searches this guy for the color buffer source and ties it to that sync. And that's the way all these work. That is what that finalize does. So we might want to internalize that to happen like either after the creation or after the resources have been loaded. Not exactly sure where we're going to want to do that yet. Now that I think about it. This might be too soon for it. Might need to happen after the render graph acquires its resources. All right. Oh, so we have some redeems here. A hydrate redeem. Thank you for the redeems. And a stretch, which I could use for sure. Look up window kill for resizing windows without artifacts on windows. I vaguely remember reading about that, but then I don't think there was an equivalent in X11. And I don't remember if macOS had it too. So it might be one of those things like that it may not be able to use. Let's see. Where is... I'm actually not... Is it window kill? Maybe it's kill window. Yeah, I'm not sure. I remember there was something like that. I just don't remember exactly what. I'll look it up later. Window Kill is a game that does crazy things with windows. Yeah, I've seen that one, but I forget what... there was a function that they used. Just an example of it being possible. Gotcha. Okay. El Henry Cito, thank you for joining us. First time chat. Welcome. Hi, where do you recommend to learn C if I already know Java and Golang? So I learned C initially from this book here, which is Sam's Teach Yourself C in 24 Hours. Now, this is not 24 hours like you'll learn it in a single day. This is 24 cumulative hours, right? But I found that this tended to be a pretty good book, plus a lot of resources online. And generally just reading the C specification, right? Specifically the C99 is what I would probably start with. And then, you know, you could always upgrade to C11 or C17, something like that. But 24 hours challenge accepted, right? I mean, if you did it for 24 hours straight, then I suppose, yeah. Greetings from Chile, South America. Nice. How's the weather down there right now? Because I know you guys are going into winter right now, I believe. Highly recommend KN King's C book. Pretty comprehensive. Okay. That's a good suggestion. It's cold. Yeah, I'll bet it is. I'll bet it is. All right. Over on the YouTube side. Hey dude, your game engine videos have been hugely helpful for learning how to architect larger projects and all the rendering stuff. Well, cool. I'm glad you like them, Alt Nation. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. That feedback helps me a lot, right? And even if the feedback isn't always positive, you know, it definitely helps me gauge how useful it is, right? All right. Yeah, the best way to learn is to make something. So, yeah, that's where I was going to go with that thought. So, what I would say is, once you learn the basics of the language, write lots of little programs with it to get kind of familiar with it. The things you're going to want to wrap your head around, the most important concepts is pointers, arrays, strings. All those things are handled very differently in C than the other languages that you're used to. And so you're definitely going to want to thoroughly wrap your head around those concepts before trying to write anything big, right? Write a bunch of little C projects, just little utilities or even a small text-based game or something like that, just to get very familiar with it, right? I learned C first by doing JavaScript, then C#, then C++. Don't do that. Yeah, I would agree, don't do that. Get very good at debugging too, then you will get an understanding real fast. I highly agree with that too, yeah. So as you're writing these small programs, change them up a bit, debug line by line, and watch what the data does every time you execute a line, right? And that'll really help you understand what exactly is going on under the hood. C is very powerful, but C also allows you to shoot yourself in the foot very easily. And avoid C++ shenanigans. I mean, that's preference, right? I've used C++ for a number of projects, and I used it for a number of years. I prefer C, but it doesn't mean I never touch C++, right? C++ has its place as well. Let's see. I work in Java professionally. Do you think it's a fool's errand to work on game engine development in Java versus C, C++? I do not think that, and here's the reason why, right? And I know a lot of people, I joke about language stuff a lot on this channel, right? But it's purely jokes. Seriously talking for a second. Use what you're familiar with to create a game if that's your end goal, right? If your end goal is to create and ship a game, use what you're familiar with. If your end goal is to get into the game development industry and become like a game engine dev, then yeah, you're going to want to switch away from Java to something that's more industry standard like C++. But if your goal is simply to create and ship a game on your own, then use what you're familiar with as a springboard to get you to where you need to be. Figure out what targets you want to build for, figure out the technology set that's typically used for that, and use that tech, right? So for instance, you could use Java for Android if you wanted to, right? Now, I am personally no fan of Java, right? But if that's what you know, stick with it and use that as your springboard to learn game dev. There's Java libraries out there that will help you build games in Java as well. Let's see. When it comes into big projects, you miss these pointers and clean data. Yeah. I have the problem with Vulkan if I have a texture class and free stuff in destruction. If I have a static variable of texture, it destroyed after the device has been destroyed. Oh, yeah. Because it destroyed, it returns 0. Yep. That's an issue, right? That's part of the thing with automatic destruction, right? Is sometimes you forget that is a thing or that happens, or you don't have it in mind exactly where that's happened because you didn't actually explicitly call for it. Appreciate the insight. I've been working on a project for 18 months and have but I've been recently doubting the path. Yeah, so especially if you're 18 months into a project, right? Don't change your tech stack unless you absolutely have to. There's no reason to do that. There's plenty of games that have been shipped on Java, right? Now, is it going to be a AAA game that ships in Java? Probably not, right? And I would say at some point maybe learn C or C++. But if you're already in the middle of a project, don't switch. Just stick with it, right? Honestly, do game engine dev if it's fun for you, for fun. Not. Let's see. Wait. No to very few opportunities, though. Yes, that's true. Minecraft is written in Java. Is it still true, though? I know it was originally. I would imagine that's probably been ported away from Java at this point, hasn't it? Or am I mistaken? I know it was originally. But yeah, that's a good example of a game, right, that is super popular that's written in Java. Or at least initially was, right? Yeah, so, you'll get a lot of people that'll say, you're not a real game dev if you're not using C++. Rubbish, right? If your goal is to create a game, create it with what you know. I was actually joking with Spiro earlier today when he was streaming that it would be hilarious to use PHP to build a game because I found out that there's actual OpenGL bindings for PHP. Something I probably wouldn't recommend doing, but it's possible, right? There's always a way to make it happen. It's still written in Java. Okay. Yeah. The Bedrock edition is written in C++. Okay. Yeah, I thought there was a version of it that was C++, but there are OpenGL bindings for PHP. Yes. Hold on. Let me find it. Let's see. Look at the model they're using, by the way. That looks familiar, doesn't it? It's even got like the same angle of lighting as what Kohi has. It's pretty funny. But yeah, this is PHP GLFW. So like it's literal, like this actually includes GLFW as well. But yeah, OpenGL bindings are in here. So you can literally use PHP to build a game if you wanted to. I'm actually considering doing this just as a, like, I'm considering doing it on stream at some point, just because I think it's deeply hilarious. But it's got like a highly optimized math library and everything. So yeah, it's possible. Kohi to PHP update incoming. Yeah, I don't think I'll go that far, but yeah. Stardew Valley and Undertale are famously successful games that are terribly coded. Exactly, right? But if it works, like, my perspective on this has always been, if it works, is it really a dumb idea? If it works, is it really badly written? At the end of the day, your users are not going to give a crap about how clean your code is. Your users are going to care about how performant your game is, how relatively bug-free your game is, and that's it, right? How fun your game is to play. They're not going to care, is your, code formatted neatly, or, what editor you use to make it, or even what language you use to write it. Like, nobody cares. Your end users don't care. Yeah, it is pretty incredible that, but yeah, that was actually like making me think of, like, that would actually be a fun thing to experiment with on stream at some point. I might be wrong on this, but I thought Minecraft Bedrock was written in C#. I thought the point they were trying to prove was, look how easy it is to port Java to C#. That might be. What is... Let's see. Oh, well, okay. At least Google says it's written in C++. Bedrock Edition in C++. Yeah. So yeah, I guess that's the answer, right? Just don't go full Yandere simulator and spend 10 years into a beta with an unmanageable tech debt. Yeah, exactly. Or alpha even. Yep. 100%. Yeah. So speaking of tech debt, that's what we're trying to resolve tonight, right? So we're trying to get some tech debt kicked out of here. Okay. So we have this set up. What was the other error that I was thinking about here? Oh, right. The editor gizmo. Okay. So we had a fix me in here to set this in the debug 3D render graph node. Might want a way to reference just the geometry and not have to maintain a pointer in this way, which I still agree with, right? So we have this, debug 3D type of node in here that is specifically for drawing debug geometry, right? So to go back to this, debug geometry is like these lines here, the grid, these lines here of the axes, this box right here, the gizmo, which I don't think I actually have an image of, but the gizmo where we can select an object and rotate it, translate it, all that stuff. All of that is debug geometry, right? And the gizmo is essentially a collection of a few sets of that, where it's got the different pieces of geometry that are used for the different modes, like the circles for the rotation and the axes for scaling and translation, etc. So before, what we did was we had this sort of freestanding editor render graph that would just take a pointer to this gizmo and deal with it that way. But I think we could handle this in a more generic way, where we could just say, hey, debug 3D or, debug render graph node. Here is some geometry that I need you to draw, right? And then we take a look at the gizmo, see what its current mode is, and feed it, feed that geometry over to this debug guy here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable this for now, right? And we'll come back to it. Because we don't need the debug gizmo necessarily right away. So I think that actually resolves all the issues for this file. So let's build. All right, so standard UI system looks like it has an issue. And that issue is ads. So we have just over a minute left on ads, and then we'll continue the stream. Ads are always an issue. Yes, they are. Yes, they are, Arvis, for sure. Gotta pay the Bezos. Got a little bit under 30 seconds left on ads. All right, ads are dead. So, Le Chirajo, I think I pronounced that right. Got curious and looked it up. There is a new game called Candria that is being made in Lisp. And what's hilarious about that is I was thinking about that and I was like, wouldn't it be funny if somebody made a game in Lisp? I was thinking that earlier today. Yeah, so here it is. I'm not going to play the trailer because I don't want to get DMCA'd, right? But, I mean, it's pretty legit looking to me, right? It's written in Lisp, which is kind of awesome. I don't know, does it say anywhere here that it's actually written in Lisp? Press kit, maybe? If that's true, that's kind of awesome, right? That's an example of exactly what I'm talking about. Like, stick with what you know, right? So I'm definitely going to keep an eye on this one because it looks interesting too. Feeling a lot better about my Java game for sure. Awesome. Do you have any experience with Lisp, not outside of configuring Emacs? My only opinion on it is that's my opinion on Lisp. And if you know anything about Lisp, you know exactly what I mean. But yeah, I haven't really used it outside of Emacs, right? So I can't really talk too much on it. All right, so this is the error message that it is bleating about. So we have external system register. I think we actually said we didn't need to do this because our update was able to be hooked in via the plugin. So actually, I think we can actually get away with not doing that. All right, looks like we have just a couple of... Oh, really? It caught this in the H... What order is this trying to build this in? Entry.h has some issues. Okay. So... This is bleating about... No member named on resize instruct application. Oh, right. That's down here. All right. And then in testbed, entry, let's see. We have a few issues here. Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this. So this is our... Let me close this other buffer as well. So this is our other... This is our entry point into our testbed application, right? So we're missing some things here. So first of all, this I think needs to be core event. I think this needs to be memory, k-memory. And then this needs to be strings, k-string. And then this containers array. I think this is probably due to a missing. I think this is just my my Clang D not having what it needs. So let's look at... I guess we could use this one. Let's take a copy of compile flags and put it into here. Yeah, because that doesn't have one. And reopen this file. That solves most of that stuff. So what the compile flags is what my IntelliSense uses to pick out, all of our include paths and stuff like that, right? That's how it knows what's defined and that kind of stuff. And ordinarily, this is automatically generated. It's just since we haven't been able to build, I haven't been able to generate this. This should also be... Actually, we don't need to meet that line. Okay. So that's most of it. Renderer plugin doesn't exist. That's interesting. Let's see, what else? So there is no app on resize anymore. Actually, isn't that app... Was it on window resize? Or did we completely remove that? It's on window resize. Right. Application on resize. I think that needs to be application on window resize. Nope, we called it on resize there. What is the function definition of that, though? Right, so that's actually going to be wrong as well. So our application types is expecting a constant k-window structure versus what our application actually provides, which is ostensibly not that. So our application provides this width and height. So this should really be right. So that's the window that's being resized, in other words, is what that's looking for. So, okay, window, right, and then application on resize here needs to be application on window resize, and this needs to be construct k window, right, and then this is going to be window width, window height, right. So that should do for that. Right, let's see. So this should be on window resize. So essentially what this does is when we load our game library, it loads up function pointers to all of these things, right? So the application has to implement these specific functions, right? So it loads those up, assigns the function pointers, and then invokes the library onload. And then, so some of this stuff is actually covered by our app config, which is here. So let's see, Windows config, right? So this is not at all the way that this is structured anymore. All right, so these, actually, that doesn't exist. Application can inject anything it needs into the configuration at this point. So what this is really going to do is load up this app config. It's going to read this stuff up here, which actually we probably still shouldn't even be doing this. Let's get rid of that. So app name testbed. Let's call this, let's actually say kohi engine testbed application, so that we can see where that's coming from. Right, we're going to do away with that as well. Right. Okay, so our source file's here. So that's for the hot reloading. We should probably switch to the safe methods of these. So the safe versions of these functions dynamically allocate instead of using predetermined buffers. Right, so we'll do that, and then we can get rid of the unsafe bits. And just have that, and then we can free these strings. So string free, source file, string free, target file. All right, so that's the safer version of that. We still have another one down here. I can fix that later though, I guess. Path. I don't feel like dealing with this one right now, so I'm going to come back to it. All right, let's build. Okay, so this is interesting. So it throws a warning everywhere else, but for our application, it's actually treating this as an error. This, right? So this deprecation message should be just a warning. So my first instinct there is let's take a look at the library makefile versus the executable makefile. I think the problem is there, right? So it looks like for the Windows architecture, we have it here. For Linux, I don't see it here, and I don't see it here. Oh, interesting. Did I not include it for anything but... Well, how is that possible? Because it works for this one. Let's see. Nope, it is here for this guy. But there's only one instance of it here. Yeah, so it looks like we did not add it there. So we did that. Looks like we did that right before where? Right, so we'll put it there. And we'll do the same thing here. All right, so let's go back. Let's kill this one. Let's build again. Now they're warnings. Okay. So we want those deprecations to remain warnings. We only have one error, and that is this renderer plugin thing. So that's an entry.c. That was towards the top, if I remember correctly. Okay. So, renderer plugin creates. Plugin creates. We don't use anymore. That was the old way, the old non-standard way that we used to load our renderer plugin. So that doesn't exist anymore. Also, our audio plugin creates is also not in use anymore. All right, so we can actually do away with that one too. Almost. Okay. So undefined reference to application config parse file content. Really? Application config parse file content. So the content of an application config case and format. Did I name it something stupid? Let's see. So we have application config parse file content. Oh, I know what it is. It's not that. It's because we didn't export the symbol. And I'm thinking we probably should just go ahead and do this one as well, right? I'm willing to bet that's actually what it is. Okay. Now we're in our test library, which, as far as I'm concerned, that can... I don't really care too much about that, right? But it's bleating about... Oh. Let's see, that's runtime tests, right? So... the problem is, that's in core, not runtime. Oh, that's annoying. Okay. So we have... Oh, you know what? Is this parser? I think this is actually all core stuff. It is. So technically, these aren't runtime tests. These are core tests. So let's rename that. And we'll do, let's see, we need to edit 2 build scripts. Right, so this is going to be, instead of kohi runtime, this is going to be kohi core tests. And kohi core tests. Okay, so that is probably due to a include issue. So when we're building this guy, we are including the core and the runtime. And we're linking the core and the runtime. Maybe we need to do a clean. Oh, I think it's memory allocators. Linear allocator. Yeah, this should be... that, I think. Yes, okay. Dynamic allocator is going to be the same thing. So this is going to be... allocators. K memory. It's going to be this one. Free list tests. The reason that we're having all of these is because we moved things around structure-wise. So some of these things didn't get... some of these includes didn't wind up getting updated. Case and parser tests. All right, so this is going to be strings. that's it. Case string. Oh, wait, which one was that? Test manager. And I think this is now time instead of core. Tools main. Strings. There it is, folks. We finally built. I can guarantee you this is not going to run. So I'm not even going to try tonight. Because I know there's stuff we've forgotten. But it finally freaking builds after weeks of refactor. Right? Okay. This is actually a really good place probably to stop. Sup, graphics chads? Good to see you, Max. How's it going? Is our tractor ride nearing its end? Well, we finally just got everything to build successfully just now. Just to test this, I'm going to clean and build again. And it looks like we're good. Did that? There we go. I was going to say that was a little quick. Right. Okay, so we have some deprecated warnings. We know about that. That's fine. But yeah, we finally are back to the point where we're building. It's not going to run, and I know that for a fact. And I'm okay with that for tonight. But at least we freaking build, right? Which is huge. So, what I'm going to do is... Let's see, I guess we'll just do... We'll open a terminal here. That is all the files that we changed tonight. So we'll do code compiles. Definitely it won't run yet. No way. All right, and we're going to push this. That way, if you guys are interested, at least the code will actually be pushed to the feature reorg branch, right? Let's see. Hey, I like programming, but I don't want to do stuff like app and web development of game dev. I'm interested in the technical part, but I don't know what that is, and I'm really confused. I like the parts like AI and computer science, but I don't know what to do with these skills. So the best advice I could offer you there is, like, you've already determined you don't want to do app development. You don't want to do web development. Now you say web development of game dev. Do you mean or game dev? Does that mean you don't want to do game dev either? What I would say is maybe do a little bit of looking around to figure out something that you do want to do. And start looking into that field as to what is required to learn for that particular field, right? I know there's lots of stuff out there for AI right now. That definitely needs help, right? Because AI currently is just nowhere near where it needs to be useful. So, definitely figure out what you want to do, how you want to contribute, or what project you want to contribute, and then look up the list of skills that you would need to acquire for being able to work on that particular thing. And then from there, I would say, just, try to make a list of things you need to learn and go through that list and learn the things. I realize that's kind of a generic answer, right? But it's a little hard to answer it much more specifically without a lot more data, right? So let's see. I wouldn't do CS for the sake of doing CS. You can do something useful. Yes, I agree with that. It sounds like you want to pick a practical problem that you can apply CS AI to. Those are just techniques for solving real problems. Exactly. So figure out, what it is that you're actually wanting to do. And I mean, that's first, right? Figure out what it is that you want to do, what you want to contribute to, and then figure out what skills you need for that. Make a list of those skills, and then learn those things. Programmers are needed everywhere. I know a guy that programs the controllers of a brewery. That's pretty badass. I like that. I wouldn't mind doing that myself. Yeah, but you're not kidding. Like, programmers are needed for all kinds of stuff. Like, you think about like, even the head unit of the the infotainment in your car, right? That's there's people needed for stuff like that too. So I'd like to see that test suite. Yeah, yeah. I have I have things back here that I could use for that test suite for sure. Was it one big thing that you were refactoring or a lot of smaller things? Yes. So some of the major things that we covered in this refactor is we changed our Vulkan renderer to be to use dynamic rendering, which means that we no longer have to use render passes or frame buffers. We changed our plugins to use a standardized plugin system and a standardized way of loading with standardized plugin handles, right? And we've done most of that refactoring. I wouldn't say that it's 100% complete yet, but we did a lot of restructuring around that. We did a lot of resolution of technical debt items that have been sitting around that have needed fixing, resolving lots of fix me's. I've added a couple fix me's too. So we've done a lot of work there. We've done a lot of work around actually utilizing our application config. So one thing that we didn't have before is our application config was like all sort of code driven. And now we actually have a file that we can read our application config from. And I know that there are parts of this that are not currently being used or read, right? So, we can actually configure like how our systems work. Some of our default fonts, things like that, our plugins that we want to use, configuration for those. The big one is our render graph. So render graph is configurable as well with nodes instead of passes, right? So that was the render graph system also got a refactor. So like, it was kind of like this huge overarching refactor that just kind of needed to be bit off and just handled, right? Avoiding dynamic rendering is really only really good for mobile, if I recall correctly. Right. Yes, that is 100% correct. And that was the reason that I finally went ahead and just said, you know what, screw it, because desktop GPUs can handle it, right? Even Mac OS using Molten VK can handle that, right? So I went ahead and finally just bit the bullet and did it, because when we go to support mobile, it's likely going to require a completely unique Vulkan backend anyways. That's going to work completely differently. And at that point, I'll address it. If I even decide to use Vulkan at all, I might just use OpenGL or something stupid for mobile, right? And just call it a day. I haven't decided yet. But, yeah. In terms of supporting desktop GPUs, the support rate is like 99%. So, yeah. Okay. That sounds like a gig, yeah. Agreed. All right. Do you think it's do you think it's worth it to use FLAC for music? So FLAC is it completely lossless? I think FLAC is completely lossless, right? So I would say as a source format, yes. For production, I don't know that I would do that. Yeah. Yeah, I thought so. Right. Yeah, I would not use that in production. I would use it as my source material, but I would not use it for production. Like shipping, you wouldn't want to ship a game using FLAC. No way. Yeah, that's my 1/50th of a dollar bill on that. Licensing issues is what I would consider with FLAC. Yes, that's also true for MP3 technically. Okay, so I think we've reached the end of the stream tonight. I think that's as far as we're going to go. We have a really good stopping point. We are finally closing the loop on refactoring, right? So the next session, probably 2 at least, is probably going to be us debugging and going back and fixing things that we've introduced, things that we've forgotten to do, and so forth. But at least we are back to the point where we're compiling. So, yeah. Let me find somebody to raid. And while I do that, I do want to encourage you guys, if you're new here and not already following me, I would encourage you to follow me either here on the Twitch side or on the YouTube side if you're not already. It helps me grow the channel, and I appreciate each and every follow there. And spread the word, right? Because this is meant to be an educational resource, and hopefully some people get use out of it, right? So I really greatly appreciate any of that. So Trap Exit, thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Let me see who we're going to raid tonight. Let's see. Just going to have a quick look here. Trying to look for somebody that I maybe haven't rated before. And of course, the person that I was thinking of rating is now offline. So that's perfect. Okay. I did see something here that looked kind of interesting. Okay. So this is even lower level than what we're doing here, but this is kind of interesting. I'm not going to be able to stay to watch it, but it looks like we have somebody here that is doing NES development in 6502 assembly. So we are going to raid ELS Dragoon, because that's super interesting. I wish I could stay and watch that, actually. But yeah, we will. We'll see what they're up to, and we'll go from there. Yeah. And what I'll do is over on the YouTube side, I'll drop you guys a link when the raid kicks off on the Twitch side, and then you guys can go ahead and hop over there as well if you're interested in that. That is kind of a cool thing. I haven't seen anybody doing 6502 on Twitch yet, so very, very cool stuff. All right, so thank you guys so much for following and being here and interacting. I love interacting with you guys, and yeah, we'll catch up next time. All right, see ya. And for you YouTube guys, there's the link.